Michael, what impelled you to set up your training course?
Well, what we were seeing in school. Good evening, everybody. Firstly, thanks for inviting me, Alison. I really appreciate it. Um, it was the stuff that was on our to-do list in schools changing. It was the nature of the experience of the kids we were working with and the context they were living in. It was becoming harsher, more extreme in some ways, more technology interwoven. And so the behaviours that had always existed were suddenly hitting more young people, I think, and perhaps earlier and younger. And it just felt like things were changing and that we didn't really have a handle on it. And I'm 57, so I started doing this work about 12 years ago, dipping my toe in the water, if you like. And then that's a long time ago, even already, and it makes me think about the speed of we seem to be in a time now where 1 year is like cat years or dog years, isn't it? It's worth 1 year on the internet is like 7 years of old money. So it was the rapidity of change, the nature of the relationships between young people that we were becoming aware of in the pastoral and safeguarding kind of roles, and just watching the wider society really, and feeling that I would like to become more focused on working with boys and young men because they were frequently the ones in the most, and I'm just going to say the word trouble. I know it's a vague, silly word, but people generally, you know what I mean, presenting themselves or being presented as someone involved in behaviours that were disrespectful or harmful or abusive, whatever it might be, or dangerous. Um, so it's obviously the case that we need to. I feel it's obviously the case anyway that we need to focus on boys and young men because they are the place where culture's messages are aimed, and they are where they take root in a way that is harmful to them and also to women and girls. So it seems like starting at the right place rather than constantly trying to pick up the pieces when things have gone wrong with adults. So lots of reasons, to be honest, and one of them was, I think COVID changed things really because I
Yeah.
was still working in schools, although I'd gone part time, so I could do bits and pieces of this. COVID, I just thought I don't want to get drawn into stuff that isn't that focused because I just want to dedicate the time that I've got because we're all you've got to shuffle off this mortal coil at some point. I thought I just want to do this now and not be drawn into other kind of admin stuff that just isn't my cup
Oh,
of tea.
yeah, great. And what sort of skills do the staff need to learn?
If they want to facilitate a program with boys and young men, ask really good questions and listen really well to the answers.
Yeah,
uh,
that's not always easy to do, is it?
no, absolutely not. No, it's not. It's easier said than done, for sure. And I catch myself out with that quite a few times as well. I think they have to, if they are teachers, I think understanding that there are ways of having dialogues that are not teacherly is really important. That it's
Yeah,
not about being didactic, it's not about transmitting information, it's actually about learning. Because the fundamental question, I think I always try and keep going back to the fundamentals. What is it we're trying to do? We're trying to have really good, meaningful, open ended, long running dialogues with boys and young men about their formative experiences and their experience of being them in this world. So there is nothing to teach them about that. Though, we can teach things about other things, but fundamentally, I think you have to be really humble and just think, I don't know what it's like to be a 14-year-old boy or a 12-year-old boy or a 17-year-old boy. And when I remember being one, but it was really different.
yeah.
Some things were the same, but some things were really profoundly different. So, I'm not going to make any assumptions or think I know what they're going through or anything because I don't. And I think so. A skill for anybody who wants to facilitate the work, whether it's in a school or youth setting or youth justice setting, would be compassion, l- listening carefully to what people say, but observing things beyond the verbal, um, and being prepared to reflect on yourself as well. Yeah,
It,
it's not about teaching; it's about learning together.
and in fact, I don't know whether you've found, I'm sure you've found the same thing, that if you're doing a really good lesson, you learn quite a lot from them
Mm.
as you're
Mm.
teaching anyway, don't you?
Yeah, ideally,
Yeah.
ideally, as long as you've not got a very prescriptive script.
Well, that's
Uh,
the thing, isn't it?
yeah, it is unfortunately, and hopefully the program. I mean, I'm gonna walk through it a little bit tonight. Just I thought people might be interested in knowing what kind of work can be done,
Yeah.
and what kind of work is being done, and I'm going to stop and sort of maybe ask a few questions actually about challenges to the work, because as you can imagine, the very reason that you set your group up, no doubt, is that what seems to be common sense, once you utter it, you realize what a politicized context you're in and how some people have very different ideas about what you think seems to be pretty clear cut.
Yeah.
And we do live in a world of constant disagreement, but very public, very intense, sometimes unhinged, and that relates to the work that I do too.
Okay. Well, look, everybody's been to school, so everybody's got an opinion about exactly how school should be run and what lessons should be done. Over to you now. Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
thanks for everybody for coming. It's really great to see so many names. I do much prefer a dialogue type thing, but it's difficult online. I don't, I get that, but I would like to. Hopefully, there will be some space. Want the Alison for people's voices to ask
yes, of
questions and
course.
stuff like that. Brilliant. Okay, great.
Absolutely. You
Right.
fire away.
If you can let me know whether that's visible, is it? And I can.
It just takes a couple of. Right. Now, if you can put it on slideshow, because
Yeah.
I can see all your. That's it. Fine.
Okay.
Fabulous.
Brilliant. Right. Well, thanks for having me, and hopefully this is going to make some sense. This is essentially the skeleton of a training day that I do, and I've done for 5 years or so, 4 years, 5 years. And I've trained, I think, 3,000 professionals, roughly speaking, in that time frame. In small groups, I don't do huge things. I
Mm.
do like 12 online or 18 in person, because I think the bigger the group, if you're doing training, the easier it is to sit back, or you don't really know what the vibe is in the room. So anyway, um, on the back end of working 16 years in secondary, I started to focus on about working with boys in talking workshops, talking groups, some interventions after certain things had happened. But we wanted to try and get before that and ahead of the curve, because otherwise we just keep constantly sticking plaster, constantly trying to do remedial stuff and nothing preventative. So hopefully, fundamentally, this work can serve to have some preventative um, value. And I suppose because I've said preventative, I need to say what do we hope it might prevent? Well, I would say violence for sure of all kinds, um, unhealthy, unsafe relationships, desire to control and to be dominant, alienation from that which is healthy and good and sustaining, and unsafe ideas about money, which I think are very, very important for young men, because money and power are coexistent.
Yeah.
So it's not just about money, it's always about the personal power that comes with it, and about emotions. So it's ideally preventing short, tough, unhappy lives, and hopefully creating space for boys and young men to become fully human, because I think there's a lot in the world that doesn't want them to be, and it doesn't want women to be either.
Yeah.
So I try and find a way, because all kinds of people come for the training, or all kinds of people might be signed up tonight. And we're coming from different personal priorities because of what's happened in our lives. So I try and be ready for whoever comes through the door. But essentially, I've got a program, it's called 12 Dialogues. Dead simple reason for that. It is 12 dialogues on themes, used to be called 10, added two more, voila, it's 12. A dialogue, not monologue. It's not a lecture, it's not a lesson. It's about an ongoing conversation with boys and young men that the people know. And I think this is point number one. There is an industry, and you alluded to this slightly earlier, Alison, of this PSHE, RSE, the industry of peripatetic outsiders coming into schools, meeting the needs of schools to talk about whatever consent or knife crime or this or that or all of these things. But I was in schools for a long time and I saw a lot of outflow of money and I saw very little inflow of skill. There's no legacy, mostly.
Yeah.
And some of those providers are wonderful. It doesn't matter. It's still not a skill transfer, but at least they're good people and sound. Unfortunately, the wild west of this business model includes people who are very far from sound. And you probably can think of three or four famous ones already. And
Of
I
course.
would class Stonewall, Mermaids, Gendered Intelligence, and many others. And others are just kind of grifters, really, just lone sole traders. And, it's what it is. It's a mixed bag. So that was what part of what pushed me as well. I was thinking, what is there out there for boys and young men? What programs are there? What can I find? The answer, not a great deal. 10 years ago, barely anything, a few TED Talks, but they were mostly American. It didn't feel like there was anything for here, this country, as diverse as it is. Well, these four countries, as maybe should say, in the British Isles or the North Atlantic Islands. However, don't upset anybody, whatever we want to call it. Yeah, it just didn't feel that there was anything vernacular. It all felt imported, American and Australian, for reasons which are kind of interesting, but not perhaps to go into now. So I started to take a lot of notes in the conversations with boys and young men and see where it went. That was the plan. See where this goes. How can we develop an approach? And I say we, I used to do this with colleagues, but I kind of took it on and went further with it. They're still in teaching. We need something that's constructive, that doesn't feel like a punishment or a judgment or a condemnation, because nobody reacts well to that. It's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. You do have to have a certain different tone if you're in the judicial system, of course, or policing. But as teachers, or youth workers, we're not in that place. So it's about building a different kind of interaction. Fundamentally, it's about being safe for them, the boys, young men themselves, because they're human beings and they deserve safety, but live in a world fraught with risk and danger. So that's them. They matter.
Yeah.
But they also have to be safe to be around. For other boys and young men and for women and girls. It's a inseparable, in my mind, it's inseparable. So a notion of having your own self-worth, but that implies the worth of others. And how do we develop conversations around that in a way that opens as many doors as possible and places as few obstacles as possible to see where we can go so that, yes, we can talk about misogyny, coercive control, and all of that stuff, but that it feels that it's part of a bigger picture,
Right.
that somebody can be a protagonist in starting with their own life.
Okay.
Hopefully, that's making some kind of sense so far.
Absolutely.
Right. So the notion of safety is really important. Safe for me, safe for you. I just put this brand new slide. It's only about 5 minutes old, and it's stuff I've been tweeting about this week because I just thought it'd be interesting to see where we're up to. And of course, you can't beat the news because the news is the news is the news now, isn't it? Of course,
Mhm.
the BBC just talk about the BBC all day. Anyway, there was an article. I'll share these links in the PowerPoint, and you're welcome to send them out. I'll find the actual stories, but there is a lot of research coming out recently about boys and young men developing kind of habits of intense loneliness, but having pseudo relationships with AI chatbots,
Yeah.
and how that is ultimately extremely dangerous and unsatisfying, but risky and misogynistic and alienating. The one in the middle there is a huge issue culturally, because I'm writing a book at the minute, and part of it is about where are the men in terms of professions. Where are men present and absent in education, youth work, probation? Looking at the stats and the numbers of that, and one of them is early years. The percentage of male staff in early years is about 2%. Now, the typical kind of framing of that by men's rights activists, etc., would be that they are female-dominated spaces. Another way we could describe it is male abandoned, and I'm interested in that. Numerically, yes, a dominant, but dominant is somewhat value laden, and I think absence is value laden as well. Why are men not there? But then this story is a really problematic one for somebody like me, and I'm sure some of you as well would like young children to see men caring,
Yeah.
present, showing up, but it's really complicated. So, there's stuff. There's so much in this general work with boys and men. Where do you start and where do you stop? But there is definitely a downward trajectory in teaching of men. Massive downward trajectory in youth work. Barely any young men are doing youth work. That matters a lot. Barely any men are in probation, working with offenders. It's really, really interesting, these trajectories, and they're quite stark and rapid. And I'm just throwing these out as stuff that's at plates I'm juggling at the minute, just thinking about. And then the one on the right there was a report about Prevent referrals. The Prevent program, I'm sure
Mhm.
most of you are aware of it. Where if you pick up on signs that a young person you work with, either in school or youth work, is saying things that lead you to think that they might be becoming radicalized, involved in acts of violence or terrorism, whatever it might be, then you make a referral, etc. It's up about 1,000 on last year. It was 7,000 ish last year. It's at 8,000 ish now. But none of the reports, it was on TV, wall to wall the other day, and the radio, none of them mentioned the sex of the referrals.
Yeah.
97% male. None of them mention it. It's like we're invisible. And there's reports about the lost boys and that. Yeah, we're lost from really important things. It's like it matters that these are young men. It matters hugely, because otherwise you just think, oh, aren't kids posing a few problems? It's like it's young men, almost always young men, and that really matters. And I think the fact that we don't say that is really dangerously cowardly. And I think the reasons for not doing it are complex, but interesting strands already, just on three recent kind of stuff. And then you've got the BBC, and you've got everything else. Okay, right. So what I do with people who come to the training, and they could be from all walks of life, more or less, as long as their work is about involves and includes working with boys and young men. So I just say, what brings you here, and one thing you hope to get from this session. Because I'm aware that a lot of people come to training for different reasons, and some of them are sent there, some of them don't want to be there. Some of them think I've done this a million times. I've been there myself. No doubt we all have in some ways. It's like, and sometimes they're very suspicious or cautious or anxious or Sometimes they can't wait to get in because they really want to talk about it. Total and utter mix. So I just try and
Yeah.
find out a little bit about people in the room. And I never realised that you had to tell adults about swearing, but apparently, I give a trigger warning. We might have to use some bad language later. And the reason for that is if we think about how boys and young men interact with each other, the language they use in keeping each other in line around codes of masculinity really matters. We have to know what words are they exactly, not just they're bad words or they're aggressive. We need to find out what the words are, and we need to be able to talk about them and think, actually, what's this? What's the bigger picture that these words are leading us towards understanding? So I'll come back to that maybe. What brings us here? Why are we doing this now? This actual thing. This is not role play. Us, Liberal Voice for Women and me. Why are we
Yeah.
all here doing this stuff? And why are so many schools and youth workers and social workers wanting to Googling stuff about work with boys, young men, problems, masculinity, all this stuff? Why are they doing it? Why? There's so much in the air, isn't there? And I've just kind of listed bits there. People's work tells them that they're working with young lads in gangs, county lines, girls getting trafficked. They're working. They're working with it. But also, like they work listening to young people and they're asking them what's going on, what's happening in your lives, etc. And now the fifth one down there, high profile drama. I think we probably know which one we're talking about. Netflix, sorry, Adolescence. It's the second
Yeah.
most watched English language program in Netflix. Huge cultural impact. It's a touchstone. I think it's flawed and complex. I think it's got some good bits, but I'm not a TV critic. It's certainly no more than a start of a conversation, no more than a start. And, with some question marks. Great acting, but, um, so I have to, in with the training, I have to incorporate stuff which is happening. So it feels
Yeah.
like it's alive and it's not something old. Um, and yet also there's a lot of ancient stuff. There's a lot of old stuff as well. Anyway, so the idea is we're all here doing this training, having this conversation. The reason is, well, there's an awful lot of bad stuff happening. And we are being asked by government or by our boss or by the governors or by whoever it is to do something about it. And that's what brings people through the door. Or they also say, and their eyes light up, saying, you know what, I've got 4 boys. I just want to talk about it. And they might have a job that is all about it, but really they want to know what to talk to their sons about because they don't think they're getting it right. So it's a total mix.
Absolutely.
On
Yeah.
top of, sorry,
We all want our children, our grandchildren to be safe. And how do we talk to them? So I think this is really, really fascinating.
absolutely. And I think the problem, and this stage of the training is, yes, we are all under pressure. Yes, there is a lot of headline stuff. Yes, we are together in this. And I try and build a sense of togetherness, which I think is not fake, but it needs to be reminded and refreshed. We are in this world. These things are happening, but it's not. When that's not really why we're here. We're here because we want something good. We want to be contributing positively. We want to create healthy societies, healthy families, safe schools, whatever it might be. So it's a combination of the two, the push and the pull. The problem is that's an awful lot of momentum. And I think some people around the country that I come across, you can see they're really stressing about it and they feel like they're drowning a bit. And it's so big and it's so massive. How do we start? Because I really want to do this and I know I have to do it. And we've got parents saying, what have you done about those boys in year 10? What's happened? All this kind of stuff. Kind of equating to we need to talk with our boys and young men. Okay. But what about how should we do it? Who should do it? When should we do it? Should it just be a big grand day of an assembly and speak very solemnly for a few hours, or should it just be little bite-sized things constantly? What does it look like? How do we move from the need to the implementation effectively? And who should do it? Now, a really interesting question about the who, given that there are many fewer men in the places which are the ideal places for the conversations. That's a structural kind of paradox that is going to take some getting around. Who should do it? But and which boys? Is this for naughty boys? Is this for boys who we know have done bad things, or boys whose parents we're worried about, or is it just actually this is for all young men because this is safeguarding? And that's my position. This is for all boys and young men. I like them all to be able to have really good conversations about the world, what the world wants them to be. Um, but professionals are kind of asking themselves these questions. How do we do it? How do we strategize for something that's constructive, that isn't going to walk into all the obvious pitfalls, that are kind of building on the positive, don't come across as I'm kind of related to the police somehow or other, or I'm trying to investigate stuff. How do we do it? So hopefully, by giving a voice to the collective experience, we're all in this situation somewhat, various, but kind of we've got some common ground. Um, really simple questions. Are we seeing and hearing things in our settings, and it could be in our families, in our workplace, whatever it might be, that suggests a need? I mean, are we actually, what are we seeing? What is going on in our work lives and our experience with the boys and young men that suggests a need for something specific and intentional with them, with boys and young men? That usually erupts into a long conversation and people just offloading. But it's interesting, if you've got a group of 12, 13, 14 people, you might have somebody from a rural primary or an inner city pupil referral unit, or somebody who's attached to the police. And they're going to be speaking at different kind of levels of intensity, if that makes sense. But that gives the whole picture. There are vulnerabilities and risks almost everywhere. And they might start talking about male mental health, or they might start talking about coercive control in teenage relationships. They might, all of it. It's like if the question is a magnet, let's see what comes. And the idea is let's fill in these notepads together and to try and crowdsource an understanding of what's going on with our boys. So we move on from that, and this next bit is something that is so rarely done. It's mind-boggling. And when there have been interventions, particularly in schools, I think, with boys that have gone wrong, that's the question that they haven't asked. How will this land with the people we want it to land well with? It's almost like we don't need to ask the question because it's so glaringly obvious that we have to do the work, that who could possibly be unhappy about it unless they were a Nazi? You know, that kind of simplistic thinking. That is actually a really complex question, or the answers are complex and totally different. I don't know if you want to stick anything in the chat, anybody. I've not got the mental flexibility to be able to read and do that, but I'm just going to open it up. If you wanted to pop something in the chat, is what misgivings might different kinds of people
Yeah.
have about doing work that is flagged up as being for boys only? What kinds of responses might there be? And I'll wait a minute or two, let people jot something in, because and that could be from parent, carer, community, colleagues, the boys and young men themselves, or even ourselves as the people who might have to deliver it. There's all kinds of possible. They might not disagree, might not agree with each other, but they've all got something in them that's thinking, not sure about that.
Lots of
Or
suggestions here, Michael.
oh, great. What
Yeah,
kinds of stuff?
everybody's fixated on inclusion, says one. It's
Right,
sexist. Boys are the problem, in quotes. It's
right.
puberty, talking about sexual matters, which is very scary for a lot of adults.
Yeah.
And the first comment was the gender enforcement. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure we'll find out later.
Right. Well, that's a good
But
start.
yeah,
That's a good start. And it could be that you start to do the let's say you are Smith School and you start working with a group of 10 year 10 boys and suddenly people are not happy about it. That's one reason that you haven't told anybody about it. You haven't communicated. There is no communication. It's just
mm,
in a silo. But it could be that you make a bit of an announcement. We're going to do this thing, and then you've got 6 or 7 different emails or phone calls or visits, all saying different stuff. In my experience, what I'm hearing, and it'd be fascinating to know if there are any other stuff popping up in the chat. Um, why are you picking on boys? You're always picking on boys. Now, the opposite end of the scale is um, it's kind of like weirdly contradictory. What are you going to do for the girls? Because you're pandering to the boys by giving them extra time, extra attention. So you could have 2 people saying that it's kind of diametrically opposed stuff, but both unhappy with the work that's being done. It's an interesting and slippery one that they might see it as part of the woke agenda. They
yeah,
might say, "Oh, it's typical, all those bloody initiatives, all the woke language. Here we go, man bashing. Knew that. Yeah, I'm sure that headmistress is a lesbian. The kind of stuff that people say. It's just normal conversational stuff, isn't it?
yeah,
Or do you think there's something wrong with my son? Is there some kind of veiled attack on me? Or
mm,
then also you would have perhaps religious, cultural kind of um, stuff playing into it and class. So it could be that you've got 1,000 parents all with pitchforks and torches, etc. And actually none of them agree with each other. They just all agree that they don't like the sound of this
yeah,
for
yeah.
different reasons.
We've got comments in the chat.
Yeah,
In my experience, some staff were keen to push one version of gender ideology and no practical addressing of the realities for boys who identify as such. Also,
yeah,
a very valid comment. Another
yeah,
one is: could a case be made to use hard data of male issues and design training interventions to handle those things? I mean, the data are very clear in some areas,
yeah,
are not.
yeah,
Another
absolutely.
Another comment: this work is really important. Boys need to have positive role models and see positive masculinity in action. And sadly, it's too often that they see the wrong sort of role models. Sex specific safeguarding is essential and equality in action. And another comment from a woman here: girls are bad too. There's another issue there. Perhaps we'll come to that
It comes up.
later.
It's certainly a comment that's made often. All of that, all of that in a school, maybe with 1,000 people in it.
Yeah,
Absolutely, you'll get some staff who politically would really despise each other because we are who we are. We're all complex, and this issue is a politicizing issue. It's a hot one. It cuts across a lot of things for a lot of reasons. Broadly speaking, things that people have said in the past have been, stop picking on boys. What's wrong with them? They get a bad rep, and why are you constantly giving them extras? What do the girls get? Are you going to do something for the girls? Like, okay, right, how do you square that circle? It's an interesting one.
yeah,
Suspicion of the agenda. It's something political. It's something woke. It's something that, I, you know, what's why do you not like boys? All that kind of stuff. Or why don't you just teaching them maths and English? You're not doing very well at that. I think you should focus on that sort of stuff and let parents and carers do their job, which is, a reasonable point. I would say that it's a partnership in an ideal case, but they would say this is not for you. You're overreaching. You're overstepping your boundaries as a school or as a youth service. But that question, that reflection, and that capacity to reflect is absolutely fundamental, I believe, and frequently leapfrogged because of all that. We're in a rush to do stuff. And often parents, in the wake of an event, the parents will be saying, "What are you going to do about that?" Then they've set up WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups, and maybe they want to meet the head teacher and all of that stuff. So there is, a volatile, dynamic situation, and things can go pretty wild pretty quick. If anybody's ever had, a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group set up about something they think that somebody said or done or whatever it may, regardless of the intention. So we're establishing with the people who are in the place to do the work, what are the issues? Let's talk about it. Let's name them. And let's kind of be clear about what we're seeing. And that'll look different in every postcode, but there'll be some common ground. But then thinking, right, so it looks like we're going to have to do something. Why might other people not really want us to do this? For all kinds of reasons. Or why might, if I ask my colleagues to do it, why might they not want to do it? And that could be because they're victim survivors of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But we never ask them. PSHE teachers are not routinely asked in this country to identify themselves as someone who could be re-traumatized by the work being done. That's just not okay. But that's how it goes in this country. Unless you have a personal, friendly relationship with somebody who's happy to confide in you, you will, as somebody organising this work in schools, the pitifully small amount of work done in schools, you'll just say, right, you've got 3 periods next year or whatever it is, so it's your turn on the PSHE cycle, whoever you are. So it's an interesting
Yeah.
it's an interesting way of running a jumble sale, is by pushing people who are trained to do geography, maths, French, PE to talk about stuff that they may feel really uncomfortable about and are not trained in at all. Many of them do their absolute level best, but some of them are the wrong people to do it, and some of them are actually harmed by doing it. And that's a reality of how it works, unfortunately. And we're talking about tiny amounts of time for the kids, unfortunately. If you spend an hour and a half talking about consent, concertedly, sexual consent, that's average in a 7-year school career. And it might not happen till year 10. So you might have been, as a boy, perhaps, consuming visual representations of the lack of consent, which is fetishized, for years,
Yeah.
hundreds of hours. You could easily be that, and you get a 90-minute session or a 50-minute session when you're 14. Where's the logic in that? Anyway, I'm not a doom monger. I'm not a doom monger. I think sometimes we just need to describe the nature of the context. Um, So we're establishing that there are issues, but there are problems that we need to think about. How are we going to do this thing? Then we can do it calm and collectively and transparently communicate well and bring as many people on board as possible. So what's the nature of the conversation that people might be having with boys? And I think fundamentally it's about the safety we want for them, and we want them to contribute to others, but also the extraordinary power of social norms. They've always been powerful. They're just triply, quadruply powerful now with algorithms and like life online. They were always powerful, weren't they? Even in villages like 1,000 years ago, they were like stiflingly powerful. And they are no less, and very probably much more powerful now, because they're hard to escape. Even like it's hard to take your eyes off a screen for some children. Um, so where do you get the counter narratives? So I try and do some conversation with the group, basically nailing down like the power of social norms and the fact that we're absolutely surrounded by them all the time. And social norms is a bit jargonistic, but unwritten rules is a bit more kind of understandable. And so, we start off in the room, what social norms are being observed now, and people say things like, well, we're sitting listening, we're all sitting on chairs, whatever. And then you say, yeah, well, I'm glad to see we're all wearing clothes as well. And often people don't think of that, but that's the level we need to get to, that we are completely surrounded by invisible influence and laws of certain kinds that are much more important than the actual laws on statute books that you might not even have the slightest idea exist. But you know about the social norms, we know about the unwritten rules. For
Mm.
example, in a lift, I mean, wow. I mean, where'd you start? Where'd you stop? So many. And so I would happily sit in a room with young lads and say, right, you're in a lift. What are the rules? What's going on? Well, there are no rules. Really? Right. Okay. So, so it would be okay to do X, Y, and Z. Oh, you can't do that. It was not illegal, but you can't do it. What? Ask somebody if they're okay. No, you can't do that. No. And it's just opening up like kind of our cultural kind of agreed norms, things that are kind of policeable. You don't know they're there until you break them. So it's starting a conversation, drifting towards the role of that in the lives of boys and young men, using innocuous, examples. And then it once that's clear in the minds of the people doing it, it's like thinking, well, what are the norms, social norms, unwritten rules that exist amongst the boys and young men you know? What do they do that is not part of the a legal requirement that you're not forcing them to do, but they do in very structured ways, and they are clearly keen to be seen to be doing by their peers. So it's just kind of moving into that territory. I know we might talk about people giving dead arms or getting them in headlocks or swearing at each other or whatever it might be, because every demographic is different. But the idea is they're keenly aware of what they should and shouldn't do in the eyes of other men. And that may well contribute to them policing each other or being policed. So I'm sometimes with people who are very nervous about doing this work. And so I try to kind of pitch it from there upwards and just make it feel like that we're steadily moving together and it basically stating the bleeding obvious in a sense. Um, all boys are born into a world deep rooted in system, social and cultural values and beliefs around how men should act. And I say, is that true? I've never had a no yet.
Yeah.
You do occasionally see people who seem to be desperate to start talking nonsense. You do occasionally, but not very often. Not very often. And that's why breaking it down is this true? Yes. And this can have a powerful formative influence on them within their cultures and across cultures, because all human cultures have certain codes and rules about what men and women are supposed to do and how they're supposed to interact and families and all that. Some of it's all right, some of it's not. It depends. And what examples can we think of? So I'm dragging it from them. What do you see with groups? You might be in a school with 20 different cultures and religions and languages. Have they all got ideas about men and women? Yeah, right. Let's just explore them. Let's do a bit of a stock take on them. But what is common if we step back from the specific? I used to work up in Manchester with Women's Aid doing a 16-week, 20-week program with the domestic abuse perpetrators, adult men in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And it was like the United Nations, as you can imagine, completely multicultural, multi ethnic. Apart from they were all working class, that was a very clear thing because middle and upper class men are much harder to spot as abusers. So they're easy, they get out of it easier, or they create structures that protect them from that. Or it seems incredible that they could be doing that. But the point I was trying to make there is might have had 5, 6 different religions in a room, and none, of course, atheists. Um, and they are different from each other, but they're also really what they had in common was what they thought about men and women.
Yeah.
It was about power, and it was about relative status, and it's about dominance. They had that in common, so that was where we could talk about. So it was actually useful to have the diversity in the room. It's not problematic. It's like wow, we've got 7 different religions here. Isn't it interesting that you're all in this room here because you've been referred by social services? It can't be as a direct result of what you are claiming is your main characteristic. There must be something else about a fundamental belief. Um, so again, I'm kind of walking really slowly with people who come to the training because they're so diverse and so nervous in some cases. And I just say that as boys grow up, they are subjected to invitations from the world to behave in certain ways. And at the same time, their sisters, metaphorically or literally, are being dealt with in the same way by the world, in terms of processes of socialization, but the content of the socialization is different. We are being trained to be men, and you are being trained to be women in the same place at the same time, but it's like we're both watching different TV programs sat next to each other. And in fact, that's exactly how algorithms work. You've got a 15-year-old and a 15-year-old boy, and he's identical. Well, can you have identical twin sisters? I suppose you can. They look a lot like him. And they would seem to be completely subject to the same social influence, but of course they're not, because their devices are widely divergent. So it's just the notion of a world is welcoming boys, and it's trying to shape them in particular ways to recreate itself, the culture. It wants to exist, it wants to carry on. And here we are, teachers, youth workers, social workers, parents, carers, of course, volunteers, whoever it might be. We've all got a role. And it might not be very big, it might be a few hours a week, it could be occasional, or it could be quite a lot. I mean, even a standard situation in a secondary school, you might know a lad for 7 years, and his parents, and his grandparents maybe, and his mates, and his house and his estate, or his village, or whatever it is. You might know quite a lot about them. And I think these are the best people to have these conversations. So, but we have to be realistic. We can't change people radically, and we don't want to mold anybody. We just got to do what we can. Um, and again, sometimes you have to go really deep and simple. Do we agree that everyone needs and deserves an equal chance to live safe, fulfilling lives? Most people say yes, I'll be frank. Occasionally you say, what about murderers? Going, all right, let's keep our eye on the ball here. We're talking at birth. Do we believe that everybody deserves that? And most people go along. And again, so that means we're building a road together. Now, I would be willing to say that if you've got 10 people in a line, ask them all the same question, they could cover the entire political and religious spectrum. Most of them would say yes. How do we how do we maximize that, what we've got in common? It's quite a big philosophical question because it's so easy to dive in immediately at difference. Let's keep going. What do we all agree? This? Well, yeah. What about that then? Being a boy or young man or a girl or a young woman in 2025 comes with its challenges. Everybody says, yeah.
Yeah.
One or two have said, or non-binary kids or whatever. I went, yeah, okay, that's interesting. Thanks for adding that. That's interesting. They are still either male or female. That is, regardless of your views on that very complex area, they are one or the other. So, whoever you might have in your mind, they're one of those people. And is their life got challenge in it? Yeah. So it's kind of, I'm not going to get sidetracked. I'm not going to be sidetracked. The next question is, some of those challenges are the same. If an asteroid's coming to the Earth, we're all going to die. Male or female, doesn't matter. Rich, poor, black, white, all dead. Beyond that, though, or short of that, everything plays out intersectionally. Everything does. COVID did, didn't it? I'm lucky. I've got a nice garden. You know, my mate who's in Birmingham lives in a tower block. Not so much fun. You know, like just simple examples like that. So some challenges are the same for boys and young men and women and girls. Some are different. We need to talk about that. And if we don't, we're not doing our job properly. Risk is specific. Risk is bespoke. It's personal. Ultimately, it's individual. But we can't deal with it. We can't do programs for individuals. We try and make it as practical as possible. Recognize. And so I'm just kind of inviting agreement. And most people kind of go along with it. because it seems to make total sense. I don't know if you feel that it does. I hope I don't feel like I'm kind of tricking people, but I'm just trying to establish commonality and a sense of common purpose. Right. Evidence shows that some of the risks to which boys and young men and girls and young women are exposed are connected but not identical. Would it be fair to say lots of our adolescents are at risk of grooming into some form of exploitative criminal activity, one way or the other, county lines, let's say that. Rural, urban. I mean, most people say yeah, there is a risk. But the next thing is it the same process to recruit a boy into a gang as it is a girl? If I were an abuser, and we do kind of role play this, I practice being a recruiter into a gang, and I might whisper to somebody, what words would I say to you as a 14-year-old boy that would make you want to do this? Or feel somehow drawn to it? And we kind of write a script. It's about being a man. It's about being tough. It's about having money. It's about having loads of sex with loads of girls and about being seen as better than other men. It's the kind of the red buttons that, that's not to say that the girl isn't going to end up somehow involved in gang life or county lines, but the process and the language is totally different. Therefore, we need different approaches to interrupt and disrupt and prevent. And also, once these two 15-year-olds are affiliated to Blue Gang, they don't do the same work at all in the gang. It's sex differentiated. And I think over the years, some people have said that was helpful in settling their minds because people's minds are kind of a bit shredded, aren't they? Or because of the last 10 years of indoctrination and kind of disruption since the Stonewall went to 2015, wasn't it, effectively? But people kind of, they want to do the right thing. They want to do something useful, but they're thinking, am I right? Am I going mad? Is it okay to talk about sex? Is it all that? And I find easy, slow, build, give really good concrete examples if you can, if that works. And sometimes I might talk about like this is a waiting room of a doctor's, and we've all got something wrong with us. I've got an arrow in my back, you've got sunburn, they've got a migraine, she's got, I don't know, a broken leg or something. But the doctor comes in and gives us all a pill. It's the same pill. How do we feel about that then? Because we've been treated by the doctor. But what do we feel about that? We feel unseen, cheated, shafted, whatever it is. We don't trust that person. There's no relation. So by treating the boys or young men or the young people who we're working with as if they're like a generic whole, an amorphous mass, it's just not going to build a relationship and it's not going to work effectively. One person in four might be cured by this pill, but that's just by chance in a sense. And we talk about if I'm working in Birmingham with people who work with gangs, we'll talk about that. And if I'm talking in a rural primary, we'll talk about their kinds of lives as well. Because there is no script. It's just a process of thinking, who do I deal with? What are the issues? And how do I best approach the conversation with the boys? It does beg the question, is there specific work being done with girls? But I ain't going to do it because I'm a man. So I'm sure there is, but I don't know the nature of it. But I actually think that there's a lot of scope for in mixed sex schools doing stuff separately, coming back together, doing stuff separately, coming back together, and perhaps learning from that process as well. So some risks are sex differentiated. And hopefully I never say gender unless I'm talking about gender stereotyping. Never, never have, never will. Because it doesn't take us anywhere. It's like saying fog, because everybody will just picture their own type of fog. It doesn't get us there. We know what we're talking about, sex specific, and in concrete situations like crime and medication, you have to be sex specific. And it's not just okay, it's actually necessary. And it's not picking on boys to try and meet them in their space of risk and challenge. It's actually really helpful. Somebody gave me an example, and I nicked it, which I always do. And he said, yeah, it's like his mum kept getting calls, scam calls. His mum was in her 80s, kept getting calls. She wasn't really au fait with the internet and all that. And he said it's just like that demographic is particularly vulnerable to fraud. That's what stats show us. If we wanted to support our older family members about becoming aware of the risks of fraud on the phone or online, are we picking on them? Or are we just acknowledging reality?
Yeah, good point.
It's interesting to have walked through these conversations a few times, because if we haven't, it's a bit of a fog in our head, and you think, oh, yeah, I feel a bit bad doing it as well. Now you've mentioned it, I'm gonna cave. I'm not gonna do it anymore. No, you're right. But if we've walked through it and practiced it, um, so we're at this place, and I'm just gonna quick look. How long do I have, Alison?
Well, I mean, I'd like to go on all night, but
No.
clearly, I think we need to be finished by about 9. So
Okay.
if we want to have some questions, maybe another half an hour of your
Perfect.
explanation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all right with me. Okay. So, we've acknowledged the need. We've talked, and perhaps between us, we've said, well, it's different where I am or in my profession, but we're kind of mapping out some general pictures of challenges to the safe development of boys and young men and the ripple effect on women and girls. So we're kind of together, we're talking about that. We are thinking that there is a need to transmit clearly and positively, constructively about this work before you even start as well, because there will be some kind of inbuilt resistance in certain quarters, but different kinds of resistance. So, how do we, in our own minds and in our conversations and in the sessions, avoid negative framing? Well, by having positive framing. But this is a tricky one, because I do find that over the years, if I say, let's make a list of things that we don't want to be experienced by boys and young men, boom, the list just falls out: gambling, fighting, stabbing, drugs, drink, etc., prison, da da da. You think, right, what's our positive vision for boys and young men? I have noticed that it's not very scientific. There tends to be a bit of a pause, or it's less easy to say. People are less practiced in saying, I want them to know what a good friendship is. I want them to be able to make independent choices, but having taken good advice. I want them to get a good night's sleep. It's like we tend not to name the positive. So this is a moment for that. And I invite people, what is it we want ultimately? And generally it comes, the notion of safety is often brought up. And then we have to think, well, what do we mean by safety exactly? Well, we've got physical, digital, legal, emotional, social, academic, sexually. And academic safety is not getting 3 A stars and going to Oxbridge necessarily. It's feeling safe to be a learner. And an experience that feels quite frequent and common in schools is that there are a substantial number of boys and young men who do not feel safe to be a learner because of the nature of their friendships.
Yeah.
Which opens up a question that we come to later: is what is a good friendship? And where are we talking to our boys about that? And when does that happen? Until they're in court. And going, oh, where are your friends now? It's like, well, might never have thought about it much before. And financially, and that's not about being rich. It's about not having dangerous ideas about money, which can look like all kinds of different things. So hopefully we're kind of thinking, what do we want? What is our positive vision? What could we as teachers, youth workers, social workers, what could we say, actually, that's something to work towards? And it'll look different in everybody's life because of the steps will be different, but it's something to go towards, something positive and light. And once we kind of establish what that might look like in terms of skills and knowledge and relationship building capacity and all of that sort of stuff and emotional awareness, I think, right, that's the good stuff. That's where we're heading. That's where we want to go. What's going to get in the way of that?
Yeah.
What's going to get in the way of the good stuff? And that's a different way of working than what's wrong with you? It's just a different set of questions. What risks exist in the worlds the boys inhabit that can get in the way of all that stuff? Because this is about them being safe for themselves, physically, digitally, legally, emotionally, but safe for women and girls in those ways too. What is there in the world that our boys are experiencing that are actually diminishing the possibilities of those things coming true? I've chose one example, life online.
Mm.
What is the world offering them online? What are their algorithms offering them? What are they seeing? What judgment mechanisms and systems and what metrics are they being offered to see themselves and other men and women and girls? Socially mediated influence, ideas, social norms, worth, power, sexual scripts in a tsunami that never stops from being what, 7, 8, 9? So I go into detail again, and I think I often say, right, we're going to talk about the manosphere. How many people have seen adolescence in the room? I actually say how many haven't seen it. And I was in a room with 240 social workers. 3 people hadn't seen it. I was in a room with 110 social workers the week after. 1 person hadn't seen it. So it's quicker to ask who hasn't seen it. And the reason I ask it, not because I think it's the be all and end all, because it's in people's minds. And sometimes they've got a first inkling of the thing like red pill and manosphere and all of that. So I do a bit of a gallop through it, and I use the metaphor of a swamp, something that might look solid, but once you get into it, it's quite hard to get out of, and you end up covered in it. And then suddenly the swamp feels normal and all of that kind of stuff. And we describe it. I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to kind of pitch it as, this wild west of overlapping types of space online. And then thinking, well, how would we know if one of our or some of our boys and young men were being influenced by that? How would we know? What would we see? And we're thinking, well, okay, well, it might be a bit of this harsh language, reductive language, getting extremely angry about injustices. All women are, that's what girls are like, and all of that, but in a kind of um, in a troubling way, patterned or selective disrespect towards female staff, which demonstrates that the boys are learning that men have higher value than women, or women have lower value than men, and then very sexualized language. And because I work with all kinds of people, I've heard stories that just even I'm stunned at, like 9-year-old boys shouting the most appalling kind of sexual threats, but they weren't born to do that. They're the result of what has happened to them and
Mm.
what they're soaking up, and our careless life, our careless culture that has given them all this stuff. But also on ages, the feeling of nothing matters, a kind of nihilisticness. Now that's not red pill, that's black pill, as we'll see. But I'm not trying to teach you the language of it, but just kind of show having the basics of it can be quite useful. And there might be some responses to it that we don't do anything about it. The reasons for that is we just don't get it, don't know what they're talking about. It's like their secret language, don't really get it at all. Or we're just not curious about it. Or we might be a bit unconfident and we might start conversations and stop because we don't really know the ground we're standing on. We've not got the facts. We're worried it's going to kick off. We're worried the parents going to kick off or going to lose the class, whatever it might be, or that your colleagues haven't got your back because you don't know if they're talking about this as well. And then it could be that you dive in, all guns blazing, size 12 boots, and it goes wrong because of that, because there's no relationship building, there's no contextualization. It comes across as clumsy or accusatory. It doesn't matter what it doesn't really matter any of those because they're all going to go bad. They will all potentially lead to entrenchment of beliefs and values that might be emerging, and escalation of behaviours. So there's many roads to a bad Rome, if you like. The key terms, the red pill. Are most people familiar with the red pill? Obviously, 90 odd of you, I can't ask it all. But it comes from the film The Matrix. There's a character that the idea is the Matrix is a kind of collective dream. It's a con. Nobody's really living, but it looks like they are. But they're all stacked up in rows with tubes in their heads. Sorry, I'm not a film critic. But the red pill is a way of waking up, seeing who you are really, and seeing that you are being oppressed in the world. Now, for some reason, that jumped from the film The Matrix into kind of common internet parlance as an icon. The idea is that if you are red pill as a man, you are nobody can fool you. You are the master of your own destiny. You are powerful, you're dominant, you will work towards things, you will not be treated like a baby. That's for the blue pills, the ones who've gone back to sleep. So Andrew Tate, for example, would be a classic example of a man who is red pilled. He's taken the red pill, he's woken up, and he knows the truth about women and about men and about power and about money. It's a basic explanation, but hopefully it's that clear. Black pill is none of the above. It's young men, and there are tens of thousands of young men, hundreds of thousands globally on forums, on Discord and Reddit and all this sort of stuff. They are never going to be red pill because they haven't got the genetics in their mind. They are misfits, rejects, worthless. Their life is over. It's pointless. No woman will ever look at them. They will never be listened to. They are nothing. Now that's interesting from a mental health point of view. To be honest, they all are. Red pill is also interesting from a mental health point of view. But the black pill would lead to very different outcomes in its extreme iteration than red pill. And black pill is more or less like the boy in adolescence, for those of you who've seen it. He is sure that nobody wants him. He's a reject. He feels rejected. And then he will find others like that because we can all find our tribes on the internet. That's wonderful and terrible. Depends on what your tribe is, because it will just keep bouncing back the same information and ideas. Once we find our echo chamber, we're in then. And then you got your incel, which ironically is a term coined by a Canadian woman some years ago to talk about not getting much luck on the dating front. Again, like red pill, that's just leapt from where it was written and has become something else. I think the pyramid is really fundamental to it. It's about, it's a pyramidic power thing. So in this world of the red pill and adolescence and all of that stuff, you've got guys at the top, tall, strong, attractive to women, straight as well, of course, with money, listened to, and with social status. And after that, you're just going into free fall. You're a loser, you're a beta, you're not alpha, you're beta, you're second class, sigma, you're kind of weird outsider, normies, you're cuckold, you're dominated by women. So obviously this in 10 years might not be the same language, which is one of my problems with the response to adolescence was if you learn these emojis, we'll get it. Well, they probably changed a week later. But it's interesting to see the stratification because if boys and young men are being algorithmically trained to see themselves like that, and they are, it matters.
Yes.
Because How many people can be at the top of that pyramid as a percentage? 0.0.0. Whatever the hell, 1%. And it's like,
Mm.
so essentially, it's a trick. It's a trick that you could spend your whole life being tricked by. And all your psychological and emotional responses to being a failure, but also your resentment and your anger and your feeling that it's somebody's fault. They can all pour from this understanding of what you're supposed to be as a man. So and the language is meant to shame. It's shame-based language from one man to the other, and occasionally, women might say they use the same thing because you brought up in the same worlds. However, you might notice that women don't even feature in the power pyramid. You don't exist in it. It's not for you. um, it's just about you. It's not for you.
Yeah.
But you might get a reference in some kind of weird ways, like femoid or a foid or a Stacy. And a Stacy is the opposite of a Chad, but not powerful. She's just like a good-looking trophy. I often think about Scooby Doo. You know, Fred and his girlfriend, whose name escapes me. They're like Chad and
Fred and Wilma.
is it Wilma? No, I think that's the
Isn't
Flintstones,
it?
isn't it?
Oh, sorry.
No, Scooby Doo. Yeah, Fred, the tall blonde guy.
Daphne.
Daphne, there we go. There you go. Fred and Daphne are Chad and Stacey. That's tall, desirable, captain of the football team, head of the cheerleaders, that kind of stuff. A suitable mate for each other, if you like. So there is a very exhaustive language, which is interesting to know about, but not to get fixated on. I think the fundamental is the hierarchical, the impact of that hierarchical understanding, because in a relationship, a pyramid is a bad relationship from the off because it's a power-based thing, isn't it? And you're either at the top or you're below. And if you're at the top, you have to stay at the top. So all those tensions and kind of strategies to do that. So what's the impact of that? If we look at what boys are being told, what are they being told by porn? They're being told mostly by the camera of porn that women are lower than, subservient, and that they are the doer, the one who calls the shots, the one who gets what they want in very extreme ways. So what is that in the mind of boys? What is that going to lead to? Where's it going to take them? How's it going to impact on their conversations with girls, teachers, mums, sisters? Where's it going to go? And there were just some examples here of that internal monologue. If you're not the man you think you should be, and mathematically, probably not, because it's a fake formula, you're going to develop potentially negative internal monologue. You've got weak social connections, kind of a chicken and egg situation, might become alienated, detached, and all that kind of stuff. Poor social skills. But you might start developing fixations, develop poor body image. You want to compensate, so you're going to start taking steroids as a potential kind of pathway, maybe some kind of self-harm profile. Ultimately to suicide, it's potential because the rock bottom foundations are unhealthy and unsustainable. But it's not just about the boy, because yes, we want the boy to be safe, but he has to be safe to be around. So what are the risk profiles that are kind of emerging from that absorption of an unhealthy version of what it means to be a man? Well, you're going to start speaking in very derogatory, offensive, and dismissive ways about women and girls because that's what you're learning to do. And that might spill out into behaviour on buses or trains or in school or in a corridor or wherever it might be, in a bar, leading to something that meets the threshold of criminal assault, sexual assault, all the way to murder.
Yeah.
So it's behaviours built on beliefs that are collectively reinforced. So what I like to do very quickly, don't worry about this. You're not going to miss anything at all. I just wanted to finish on a particular because you get the slides. So we come out of that manosphere session. It lasts about an hour. We go, right, what don't we want to do? Because what we really want to do is build great dialogues, come across as being pro them, pro boy, pro well-being. Um, we want to explore every angle to make sure that their lives can be safe and sustainable and meaningful and rich, because they are also absolutely integral to the safety and well-being and self-actualization of women and girls, because we live in the same world. And I know Julie Bindle was going to try to send us all off to an island. I've asked about this. She said we are going to get quad bikes, but apparently we're not anymore. Anyway, I'm not dissing her, but we have a laugh together. But what don't we want to do? If we want to engage, what don't we want to do? And generally speaking, we come up with these kinds of lists. We don't want to label, we don't want to prejudge, antagonize, shut down thinking. If a young man is starting to talk about things which we are becoming concerned about, the worst thing we can do is shut down that thought process, that dialogue. And the best thing we can do is open it up to sunlight in a way that's appropriate, not like just give him the microphone, say, there you go, son, you lead the assembly with whatever's bothering you at the minute. It's not that. It's just, I mean, I've had CBT a few times over the years, and the only time it did me any good was when I actually told what I thought was the truth. I said something that I thought was a lifelong truth. And once I'd said it, I realized it wasn't. But if I hadn't said it, I could still be laboring under that misapprehension now. And that's a kind of personal anecdote to illustrate being able to say stuff, even if it's ugly and malformed, etc. Once we've said it, we've heard ourselves say it, and our peers have heard us say it, and then we can move on from that. But if we don't say it, it's still there. And we will find other people who like what we say. And then we can get stuck in this really dangerous relationship where we're just reinforcing kind of negative thoughts and ideas. So we don't want to be preachy or precious, and we don't want to shame, because shame is not strength-based work. It doesn't work. If we shame somebody, we're probably not going to change their behaviors. However, if we reach a space, I believe, that where we feel we really uncomfortable with our own behaviours, and we could call that shame, then we've led that through our own thought processes, and that can be life changing and life saving. So I'm going to close with a bit of a thought experiment, if that's all right. You're a teenage lad. I don't suppose we've got any teenage boys here tonight. I'd be surprised if we had. But let's just imagine you're a teenage boy, and your teacher wants to talk to you about a very important subject: toxic masculinity. How do you feel? I know it's difficult asking a screen that with 90 odd people in it, but it's the thought process. How do you feel as you're a 14-year-old boy and you're
Somebody says my back's up, somebody else says uncomfortable, picked on.
right? These are not great starts to dialogue. It doesn't mean that we don't want to have really frank discussions about really important things. It means that we do want that. So we're not going to carelessly lob jargon into it like a match into a pool of petrol. And you get 10 people who use this term frequently, and they probably don't even all agree with each other about what it means. For the record, I only use it critically. I critique the term. It was written first by 1983 by a white guy in New York about his dad, who was an admiral in the Coast Guard in America. He said, my father had a toxic masculinity. It was just a little phrase, and boom, that jumped the shark as well, like incel and red pill. So I think some people think they have to talk about toxic masculinity because that's what it's called. And you're thinking, what is called what? And then they struggle. We need to talk about the behaviors, the values, and the beliefs. That's it. That's clear. Let's talk about behavior, values, and belief. But I think, although we like really pithy little tweetable phrases with very few characters, you lose all the meaning. and the context, and you just, well, as you said, backs up and antagonized, offended, suspicious, fight or flight. They're out the window, they're out the door, they've told us to F off. For all kinds of different reasons. And just to move it on from the boys themselves, you're now his mum or dad or his carer. And you find out through him when he comes back from school or youth club that his teacher has spoken to him about toxic masculinity. He said, what did you do today at school, son? Oh, I had to go and see sir about something. What? Toxic masculinity. How do you feel, mum, dad, uncle, auntie?
Yeah, we brought our children up wrong.
Right. So this is no longer about the kid, it's about you. It's an attack on the parents because you're saying that my son is this thing that I've seen on Facebook. Are you saying my son is a rapist, etc., etc.? What might some parents say to their son?
What have you been doing?
What have you been doing? And what's young Jack gonna say? Nothing. And then that could go on forever, couldn't it? Well, you must
Yeah,
have done something.
yeah, yeah,
Other types of parents or carers wouldn't ask him anything. They would go right on the blower to the school, getting down to school. What's this bullshit you're doing with my son? Other questions that people really tend to ask are, is it just you? Who's in the group exactly? And that matters. It all matters. And you think, how do we avoid this stressful situation of questions and finding out after the fact, etc., etc.? Clear communication. It is true that there is a small number, and certainly some of the teachers, small number, who say, I think it'd be good. I'd be really pleased that the school was doing that. They're being proactive. And they're going, cool, that's fine. That's a minority response. Generally speaking, it's seen much more as something to be worried about and ashamed of and angry about. And we have to deal with that. So again, it puts the onus back on us as teachers, youth workers, social workers. If we're going to engage in a conversation about the subjective experience of a boy or young man in a world that is pumping him full of ideas, how are we going to do it in a way that is clearly in his interests and in the interests of those around him? How do we choose our words wisely? And where do we locate it? And I would say in a school, this is just bread and butter safeguarding
yeah,
that is barely ever done in an intentional way. It's a tough gig in school. I was all of my family and my partner, all teachers, secondary, primary. I'm not anti-teacher at all, but I think the way that we run schools and education just needs a complete overhaul in all kinds of ways. So I've rambled a bit. I just wanted to take you through because I don't need to explain to you why we need it. You know this, because why you're in this. You know the issues, the meta story and the context. It's just like, well, what would it look like, and what might it be like in a place where you are trying to do this work? What might come your way, and what fears might people have about it? And I just hope that that's been in some way useful anyway.
yeah. Well, there's such a lot to unpick there. I mean, we've had
Yeah,
lots and lots of input in the chapter, lots of things we want to talk about. We haven't got a lot of time. First of all, I'm going to take the last comment because we'll be going to some of the other ones. One of the comments from Jody is, uh, I heard our local secondary school wanted to do some work on tackling misogyny. There's an issue about hidden domestic abuse in a small rural town. So I emailed the head teacher about men at work. And when she bumped into him at a community event, he seemed very keen to work with Michael and his team. So that would be interesting to know if he did ever get in touch. And I think all of us, I suspect, sitting here, would like to think our children's or grandchildren's or cousins' school was going to be doing something like this, having you or somebody train the teachers, train the youth workers, train the police officers in how to engage with these young boys? And another question from one of the from the chat is, how would you support girls likely
Mm.
to be groomed in county line situations or any other type of situation?
Oh, well, absolutely. I, I, I don't stray out of my lane,
Yeah.
but I know I can see the need. I can see the need.
Well, are there women who are doing this for girls in schools? I mean, do
Th-
you work in tandem with people?
no, no. It's, I think that's what one of the issues is that there's a knee-jerk response among some people in schools that
Yeah.
if we do that, we have to do that. We have to do the same thing, like a
Right.
mirror.
Yep.
But the situation of men and women in the world is not a mirror. We're not.
Yeah.
It's not just a female version of being a man. It's we our entire cultural and social and historical roots are different. You
Yeah.
know, and I think to be fair to the schools, they want to be fair to the kids. So they don't want to be seen to be doing something. If it's a mixed sex school, obviously it's a dead simple gig in a single sex school. Although it's no, not so simple because you've still got to explain why not all the boys would be doing the work because it'd always have to be a sample group and hopefully as many as possible over time. But nowhere could say, right, all 800 boys are going to do this next week. It's just not possible.
Hmm.
So you think, how do we start this off, learn from it, and amplify it, and positively publicize it? But in terms of work for girls, there's all kinds of I come across all kinds of little companies, CICs with one or two or three women working in them around healthy relationship stuff and empowering girls stuff. There is a bit of a ecosystem of them. Um, but it's interesting. I think some of them, and I don't think I know this because they've told me recently, uh, two or three companies have felt that they had to offer work for boys too because because of the reasons we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
because it's that false equality, isn't it? It's balance, it's not equity, it's equality. And he's going, well, if you're going to do this for them, you have to do it for them too. Thinking, well, you know, I had an operation last year. Um, I don't want you to have one just because I've had one. What's the point in that? It seems a bit weird,
Yeah.
and I think there is a kind of very simple level reading of the situation. Right, you're doing that for the boys. What are you going to do for the girls? Or even in a very practical sense, if you've got 30 kids in a PSHE class and you're going to take half of them out for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it is,
Mm.
what are you going to do with the girls?
Yeah.
And that is a work for someone else to do, I would say. But in lots of schools that I've come across, there are small support sessions for some girls, but nothing for boys.
Mm.
And I think it's just we don't have a national strategy. I keep seeing stuff that the Labour government have mentioned over the years, and they were in touch with me quite a bit before the election. Oddly enough, phone stopped ringing. Um, once they'd won. I suppose politicians for you, innit? They they keep talking about things like teams of young men, youth workers who are going to go out there. And there's no flesh on the bones. It's just an idea. They keep mentioning it, like halving male violence against women and girls in 10 years. What's the actual flesh on the bones of it? So, yeah, I mean, work with girls, absolutely, about self-esteem and about grooming tactics and about, um, what the world has shaped them to be, or what does the world want them to be? It's absolutely vital work. Yeah, I mean, as far as I can, I collaborate with anybody, but I don't stray out of my lane.
That's fair, and I think that's respect worthy, because I wouldn't feel confident to work with boys. I'd be a bit more confident to work with girls, having been one at one time. But but who do we trust? I know you, Michael, and I trust you to do some work. But who else is popping up? as you said, some of the usual suspects doing things that we wouldn't want them anywhere near any of our children. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, no. What I've come to learn, what I used to think, I used to believe, and it was a good idea to build big movements of men, and now I don't believe that anymore.
Mm.
I don't believe it. What would a male philia look like?
Yeah, yeah,
Probably quite well. Let's say radically different. And I'm not going to go any further on that one. I just don't think it would work. I think there's a problem with big organizations of men with manifestos of some kind. What I used to, I'll be very blunt. Once I started thinking I wanted to do something, I got involved with the White Ribbon, and I left a year later when I realised it was hopeless. And
all
it was
right.
very performative, and I met a lot of men and saw a lot of men who used it as a way to acquire kudos in their local authority or their organization. And it's completely empty and performative, because I also know they were going to lap dancing clubs and using prostitutes and abusing their wives. But they were promising in public, and I thought, hang on a minute, promising in public, is that not part of the cycle of abuse? I just no. So I moved out of that. But I don't think that all men who want to get involved with things like that are bad. I think you're looking for something. You want to find something. You want to find some comrades. You want to find some fraternity. You want to find a platform to do something useful with. But I do come across really, really sound men, but they would never see themselves as activists. They're not in the public eye. They're youth workers, and they're social workers, and they're teachers, and they're mental health workers. But they do the work, but they don't want to occupy the public space.
Yes,
And you know, do I want to occupy the public? I do occupy the public space a bit, um, but I hope that it's about the work. And I do know that a lot of the men who do some of the public stuff don't do the work.
yeah.
There is no work for them to do. They've got no program. They've got nothing. It's just, I don't know. I could slag men off all that. Not all men, not all men, but but I do come across men who really, really get it and want to do it, and are sound and reliable and trustworthy and honest and humble and all of that. If they're just doing the work, but not in the activist sphere. So it
Okay.
might seem that there's nothing happening, but I think that's not really the full story. However, I am nervous about what all governments do, because all of them want to push something towards the screen, saying, "Look at that! We've got 500 youth mentors." You're going, "All right, are any of them porn critical?" Oh, we don't know about that. All right, okay. So they might well be going out colluding with the porn industry, and just happen to be 24-year-old men. And that's a strange kind of approach. So I think who really matters, but a lot of the people who deliver this are women. And that's because they work in schools and youth work and social work and probation. So structurally, they are perhaps, I'd say, 60% female, 40% male. Um, and when I started out on this, I just thought I would only train men. Let's get the men involved, get the men involved. And then I realized that we don't exist in huge areas of public sector. It's just
Mm.
not there. So nobody do the work. And some boys on foot, for whatever reason, don't feel that they can be open with adult men. I've come across that quite a bit as well. So
They're not used to
it's a
it,
mess.
maybe.
Say again, sorry.
They're not used to it. They're not used to
They're
having
not used to it,
a
or
decent bloke near them.
yeah, they've been traumatized. They
Yeah,
can't trust, but they can with women. But then that sadly feeds into the emotional burden of women. So it's like, oh,
indeed.
it's a really imperfect situation.
We've got so many questions. We haven't got time for them all. I'm just going to pick on a few. And if you'll forgive me, everybody, I think the quickest way is for me to pose some of these questions. I think it was Rachel was saying that you were asking about being in different groups of different religion or cultures, and she says maybe some of them don't even think girls or women have rights. You know, you were talking about that we all have rights to
Yeah, no
education.
doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt. Yeah,
Ha-
the specific groups that I was working with, nobody said that, but
no, I think.
one or two you could feel it and see it, and you knew it was a situation. Others were very certain that they had rights, and it was good, and it's just that their behaviour was walking on a different pavement to the words
Yeah.
that they. But not, of course, that there will be many men from many different religions who use their religion as a kind of easy excuse for their hatred of women or their
Yeah.
dominance of women.
Yes.
For sure, there is. But I think that the point I wanted to make there was um, not to be nervous about dealing with mixed and diverse groups of boys, because actually that can be lent into as a benefit to
Yes.
find common ground.
Another question was, I think from Terry, about teachers wanting to do this just with the disadvantaged boys, let's say, or girls in our case, and how you feel about that. Is it
Um,
you? Is it everybody's
well,
for this?
I've done this work in Eton, and I've done it in schools where fires have started. So I don't. I think it's for all boys and men. However, it could well be that that a teacher will know that a disadvantage is a quite broad term. It could be like, through trauma or poverty or whatever it might be. If they see that those disadvantaged boys are particularly vulnerable to influence, exploitation, or becoming somewhat detached from a compassionate life, then it's up to them. That's the rule. The professional knows their context and their demographic. My role is just to help the professionals feel confident and ready for it and up for it. And beyond that, it's up to them. Whether if they work in Millfield or Winchester or a Pro in Bolton
Mm.
or comprehensive in Liverpool, that's up to them, because all men will be in a position at some point where their beliefs and values meet their physical capacity and their cultural power wherever they are. So I'd say this is what this work is for all men.
Yeah. And in the best way, dad or even granddad can have a conversation with a son or a grandson
Oh yeah,
quietly and away from the rest of the family, and that can have a really great positive effect on their
for
life. Just
sure.
having
Oh,
that
yeah. It's not
closeness.
just professionals. No, no, absolutely not. Well, absolutely not. No, I mean, I believe primarily the responsibility is the people who brought a child into the world.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
of course.
to do that. But I think structures that we build as a culture, like schools and youth provision, etc., they have a role too. And sometimes picking up the slack where the parent story is not so good or it's totally
Right.
absent, which is increasingly common. And I think a healthy dialogue and a bit of teamwork between home and school, for example, talking about school age kids, is
Mm.
really important, which is why organizations like those quacks we mentioned earlier, who've
Yeah.
had made an awful lot of money recently, they're all about secrecy.
Yes.
I am absolutely anti-secrecy. If you believe in what you do and you can logically, justify it, why would you want nobody to know? I don't understand. It's so obviously dodgy.
Mm.
So transparency, good communication between home and school around this is the only way it's going to really work. Otherwise, suspicion creeps in, and then you get all the kind of doubts and the worries and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. And another aspect, and I think this is really the most possibly the most difficult part, is with the institution that you're working with, whether it's the school or the youth centre or maybe the court background, of all these different criteria that people might come on a course with you, where they can't face the reputational risk of having somebody do work with the children because of, you were talking about parents getting upset about, was it our child alone or all the naughty?
Yeah.
Um,
That's a really interesting point. I would say that would be an indicator of a pretty dysfunctional school. That not wanting to be ahead of the curve is not a good sign. It, it's it, we you know the, every this is everywhere.
yeah,
All boys everywhere are in the crosshairs of multiple cultural and digital influences. All of them everywhere. Good schools will run towards that. Actually, no, they'll walk steadily towards it. I think the running is the problem. Yeah, no, they will be keen to get involved. But yeah, I suppose occasionally, I think, to be honest, I think after it happened, was it the website was Sarah Soma. Sorry, somebody will know it. It's not me. It's like the English school and college young women equivalent. What was the
everyone's invited.
Everyone's invited. Sorry, my brain's gone. I was going to say The Last of Us, which is a Netflix show. I don't know what the hell's going on there. But it's quite late. I think that has changed a lot. Schools are now, all schools are on that. At first, it was a few and it was a shameful thing, and people would be trying to cover stuff up. But now I think there is a general acceptance that we all schools have got issues. I do find a couple occasionally faith schools are kidding themselves. Some faith schools are kidding themselves. Oh well, that's not really a problem for our demographic. You go, mate, okay, can't force somebody to do the work. Um, or occasionally, if somebody's in a very nice leafy part of Surrey, and they might think, well, it's not such a problem here. You think, well, do you know that? Have you done the research? Let's just ask the kids and find out.
Another question is from Terry about this issue about boys' behaviour, especially as teenagers. Is it historical? Was it ignored in the past as boys will be boys? Has it grown, and how can that be explained?
I think it depends on the actual behaviours. I mean, unfortunately, we didn't keep records very well in the past. We don't keep them so well now, but we have bodies of data now that we could refer to going back, I don't know, 10, 20 years. Not much beyond that in a way, in terms of youth behaviour, child behaviour. There would be a lot of anecdotal stuff. People who've been in teaching 30, 40 years, no question, are all noticing upward trajectories of sexualized language
Yes.
uh, between each other and towards staff, or the introduction. They can perceive, even staff who've been in post 10 years can see a big change in the footprints of porn, shall we say, in the conversational styles of the boys that they're working with. Um, oh, I'm not a historian. I'm not a historian of juvenile delinquency or whatever we want to term it as. But Boys Will Be Boys was certainly deep rooted, but it still is. I think. I think there's lots of examples where it still is, even though there are counter narratives. I think it's still got a steady stream, and I think it's actually perhaps being rebooted somewhat. I think by the internet, by content online,
Yeah.
and by the kind of, now anybody who knows me will know I am no. Uh, I am going to say, gosh, people who are described as right wing. I'm talking like Trump plus, that sphere. Now I know a clock, a broken clock is right twice a week, and we can all find things that are true about it, etc. And I don't have any implicit faith in men who describe themselves as left wing. I'm so disaffected from politics. politics are personal. Party politics, I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. And I don't even really believe left and right make any sense anymore. Anyway, I'm not even sure what the point of what I was going to say there is. What was the question again, Alison?
You don't,
Right, boys will be boys. I think
yes,
there is something very public on the right about that. About this has all gone too far. We need strong, dynamic men. We need this, that, and the other. But I think it happens in secret in the left.
yeah,
And other people have said it much more eloquently than I have. I know the union movement got problems with misogyny and cover-ups with sexual assault and all that kind of stuff. But it's somewhat more blatant in other areas who don't feel like they have to put on
pretend.
it, put
Mm,
to pretend basically.
yeah.
Porn, you see a very men who put all their pronouns in the bios and the flags and everything, just so everybody knows they're a good guy, and then just wittering on about how it's actually pro women to uh, consume porn because it's somebody's work and you should respect it and you should pay
Yeah,
for it. And
yeah.
you're thinking, all right, okay. I don't really see any qualitative difference between left and right anymore.
Yeah. Question from Sam from early on. Basically, I'm going to be accused. Am I going to be accused of being too tough on boys who are just joking about? Accused that I just don't understand boys, that their behaviour is innocent rather than intended to be aggressive. Can I even, she says, can I even be sure what's aggressive as opposed to just rough play?
Crikey, that's a complex one. It's an interesting one.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's quite. I tell you what, um, would I be if you wanted to anonymize the questions, or if they're anonymous anyway?
Yeah,
Can I spend some time and try and put some answers to most of them,
yeah,
and maybe
sure.
some links to articles or things like that? Because my
Absolutely.
brain is finite in terms of and that's an interesting one. So I would prefer to be able to think about that if that's okay.
Come back to us. I'm sure we'll
No, I'd,
talk
I'd
about it.
love to. I'd love
Yeah.
to spend some time. If the questions, I don't want to get anybody's email addresses or anything like that. But if I can see the questions,
Okay.
I will try and find relevant. I'll do some signposting if that's
Okay.
okay.
No, that's good. We can harvest the questions. Another question is: could a case be made to use hard data of male issues and design training interventions to handle those things? I
For
mean, the
sure.
data are very clear in some areas.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I think hard data is really essential.
Yeah,
Uh, and there is a strain or a thread amongst boys and young men of some who really set a lot of store by getting information. They want to know the facts. They want to know the facts. The problem is sometimes they don't like the facts, and I think the conversation prior to giving data is a question that I have learned through bitter experience: is why do we believe what we believe? Because we will believe or disbelieve data based on our emotional response to it.
yes.
Mo- Unfortunately, it's not. We are not robots. We don't just look at data and go, I accept the data. You start thinking, well, you would say that, or how many people did you ask? Or you asked it in a funny way, or where's this come from? What's this website? So
And
there's
what's your agenda? Yeah,
what's the agenda? Yeah,
yeah.
and I got that with working with a lot of teenage boys talking about OnlyFans. They're absolutely convinced that all the women involved in OnlyFans, A, love it, completely voluntary, and C, they're all rolling in money. And these just are convinced because that's what the industry does. It's how it sells itself. It's very clever at that. It's a $5 billion industry. It has to be clever. And I used to find facts about it and percentages, and actually on average you only get $148 a month, and there's only 1% who get over 80,000, all that stuff. The stuff that's facts. It didn't make any difference. It was like table tennis, ping pong. And so I tried to learn from that if we if I want What I did was I came up with a question. Why do we believe what we believe? And it was nothing to do with OnlyFans. It was calm and cool and sober because it wasn't a hot topic.
Mhm.
If we started with a hot topic like prove about OnlyFans, prove about porn, prove about prostitution, it was always going to be in the heat of the moment. But if we tried to kind of just change the conversation a bit about why do we believe, and we wrote, we wrote the list down, we do it because parents and carers believe it and we trust them, or our community believes it, or this or that. And amongst it is it suits us. We want to believe it
Yeah.
because I get something out of it, or it's convenient for me, or something like that. Now, that, amongst all the others, was something to hold on to down the line when we were having conversations about OnlyFans, because we can refer back to it, the critical thinking, the consciousness of there's a red flag here, lads, sometimes, isn't there? Because maybe we believe it because we want to.
Yes.
And that was just something that, you know, I didn't get right at first. There's loads of stuff I don't get right now. Just try and learn all the time.
Yeah. I think this has been a really great session, and all of us, we want to have something. When I lost my dad, I got a book about how you deal with bereavement, and,
Yeah,
and a lot of us, we go for a book that will help us.
yeah.
And one of the questions is there a book that I can read to give me an idea about this? Because of course I'm a woman. The
Yep.
question is a woman, and we're not familiar with boys and men and young men and how they're thinking, how they're working. So it's something that can help us to make sense of this other world that we know but we don't quite know. Uh, where, is it?
Oh, there's no particular book. I don't think. I can't think of any. There are lots of books out there, and there is a recent slew of reports coming out about boys and young men, and huge. It's like I worry about some of it because it seems it. There was one recently about Lost Boy. It's called Lost Boys or something, and there's some interesting stuff in it. But it tends to follow a pattern. It doesn't talk about women and girls. And even though my program is for boys and it's called Men at Work and all of that, I hope it is about women and girls too, because it's about the connection of the two. And there's a lot of stuff about boys and men which seems to forget that women exist and that if men are depressed, who's looking after them? And who's looking after the kids while they're pissed because
Right.
they're dealing with being sad or whatever it is. I'm not trying to be dismissive. I just think that you have to kind of look holistically at men and women together,
Hmm.
but just choose an entry point. And for me, it's boys and young men as an entry point into a conversation that's wider. In terms of a single book, no, I can't think of one. I am writing one, but it'll just be one book. They're just like a little piece of a jigsaw. Um, but I will think of a few, and I will put them in an email if that's all right, along with the questions.
That's great. I'll send you the questions we've got in the comments. Just a final comment from one of us here. We adults have to accept responsibility because it's in an environment where our young men do not feel safe. They are not safe. That they will be easy victims for this sort of ideology, and no workshops on earth are going to fix it. You talked about that earlier. If the boys still have to go out and deal with aggressive boys around them, and I would say to be aggressive in return.
Yeah, it's all hands on deck. All hands on deck. Certainly family, certainly schools have got a responsibility. But I think understanding the scale and the nature of the current challenge is really important.
Mm.
Um, because it's almost inconceivable for somebody my age, perhaps even in their 40s, to understand exactly the formative power of algorithms is it's like everything we knew for the last 7,000 years on steroids.
Yeah, it's reinforcing constantly, isn't it?
Hmm.
What you're searching for, you keep getting. Um,
Yeah.
another question: are you doing any more speaking events?
Yeah, I've done quite a few since September. I did National Association of Special Schools. That was interesting, and we were talking about prevent and autism.
Yeah.
Social worker events, I've done quite a few recently, and I've got some coming up. Oh gosh, yeah, my mind's gone blank. Um, yeah, a few. I'm in Sutton. I don't know. Sutton is in near Wimbledon, isn't it? I think soon. I'm,
Right,
d-
right.
I'm doing. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm doing what is called a Men's Day event, and I'm not quite sure what that'll be. Is it bacon sandwiches, wrestling? I'm not entirely sure. It's hard to know, isn't it? Um, I hope it's useful. It's the day after International Men's Day, but it's also about linking that with 16 days of activism. So
Yes.
hopefully the event will be joining the dots between negative experience in the lives of men and negative experience in the lives of women.
Wow.
That's the idea, was a kind of a shift from, it's not International Men's Day versus International Women's Day. It's kind of like what's the common ground? What are the themes? What are the threads? And how can we support our younger siblings and sons and students and whatever they may be into navigating the murky waters?
We all want to book you for next year's 16 days, Michael. Um, uh,
Yeah, well, I think I'm free.
I'm just going to say now, we could go on for the rest of the night, and I think we have got to stop. And I'd like to thank Rachel for managing the event for
Yeah,
Liberal
thank you.
Women. We hope we're going to put this talk up on our YouTube channel as soon as possible,